This is about a 10-minute clip from a session with Guava at Half Price Books. This little nook opens out onto the main part of the store, so there are people walking by us just behind the camera. I start out working on a sit-stay. Stay exercises like this are a really nice exercise to boost engagement when you are first getting into a new space. I often find it to actually be more effective than using the more traditional method of waiting for the dog to offer eye contact and capturing it. Because it's a little more dynamic, and as you're moving around, the dog is watching where you're going and paying attention to you because they're kind of waiting for when you're going to come back and treat them. And as I'm walking around, she is able to still be following and looking at me while being able to intake what's going on in the rest of the store.
Sit. Good.
When I train any type of stay behavior, I make sure that I am training in the way that I would walk away from the dog. So I always turn my back on them and walk. This is also one of the behaviors for her Canine Good Citizen test, so we are practicing that here as well. I am practicing those behaviors in as many environments as possible.
Down.
Now here I've asked her to lay down. That is also part of the Canine Good Citizen test that we are practicing, and she is hesitant to do it, but I just wait her out. Oftentimes people are really quick to insist. They cue again and again, and they may come in with a lure, which if I were working towards decreasing her latency here, meaning getting her to respond to the cue faster, then I may bring in a lure, but we're focusing on distraction here. So that's not something that I would do in an environment that is new to her. So there we had her break her downstay. I just come back nice and calmly and reset her, and I reset her a little farther back. I suspect laying down is just harder for her in an unfamiliar place, and that it may be a little bit easier if she's a little further away from those distractions, and I stay closer to her. Now with the downstay versus the sit stay, I'm looking for longer durations, and I'm looking for signs that she is settling. It's much easier ergonomically for a dog to hold a downstay for long periods of time, so I typically jump into longer durations between reinforcers pretty quickly with downstay work. I also make significantly less eye contact with the dog during downstay work. Usually if I'm doing sit-stay stuff, I turn my back while I'm walking away, but then I immediately turn around to face them. That's because typically if I'm going to have a dog in a sit-stay, I want that to be focused. I want them to have their eyes on me, whereas in a downstay, they've got a little more freedom to look around. It's just a different feel and type of exercise. Another reason I really like to work at bookstores that are dog friendly is you can just kind of browse the books. It's a really nice way to work on this type of behavior with the downstay and the long-term settle. I am watching out of the corner of my eye for that chin down on the ground, and if we get a long duration of that, I will hit her with a jackpot reward. So I will bring over a special treat if I have one. In this case, I did just have one treat in my treat pouch, so I probably would have given her a nice big handful. You'll see in a couple of my other videos that after this session, we did actually start to work on that chin rest down on the ground, and I started getting it a lot more often with her. As far as her service dog training goes, one of Guava's kind of biggest faults or things that she needs to work through is the fact that she is pretty hypervigilant. So this is something that I regularly incorporate into her outings, is having these kind of longer term downstays. And I find that she actually has a much easier time if I'm up moving around than if I try and sit down with her. Which of course is eventually the goal, that she is able to lay down and fall asleep no matter what I'm doing. But it's something that we're working on separately and that I typically will use a higher rate of reinforcement for. You can see how her head is up and following me pretty much all the time, which I think is what makes it easier for her to hold this downstay when I'm up and moving, because she has something to look at and focus on. Rather than if I am sitting and she is trying to hold that downstay, she gets really easily distracted by other people moving by other inanimate objects she might want to go and sniff, and she gets a little more antsy in those cases. Another thing I'm doing to help with that is I am tethering her more in the house rather than using the playpen, which we used most of the time when she was a bit of a younger puppy to get her out in the living room, have her hang out with everybody without her constantly being involved in the other dogs. Now we have transferred that over, and instead of being in the playpen, she is on the tether. And again, same rules. You can't interact with the other dogs. You need to lay down and chill out. I make sure all of her needs are met ahead of time. I give her lots of toys. She has access to the water bowl. And I wait until she has laid down on her side and fully fallen asleep. And at that time, I unhook the leash and I tell her that she can get up and we can play with toys or what have you. Essentially teaching her that the way to get off of that tether is to calm down, lay down, and go to sleep. And it gets a little bit faster every time. Now here in a second, you're going to see her get up and move. And you can tell when she's about to do this by that kind of looking around and sniffing the ground, and then she puts her nose up in air sense. So just watching this video back, I'll know in the future if I see her doing that out of the corner of my eye, I should jump in and reward her in that moment before she gets up. As it is, what I always do when they get up and they break that position is I come in and I just reset. And in this case, she is really super bored and she does not want to go back in that down. Again, just waiting her out. I do re-cue her here. We are in a new space. It's louder than what she's used to. So I do kind of wonder, did she really catch that cue? Because she is holding that sit and giving me good eye contact. I have her come in and do a hand touch. And then I go ahead, I ask for a sit instead of a down right away. I reward that sit and then I'll ask for a down again, and I do get it this time. I don't want her to break this down again, so you will see after she lays down, I stay with her and I give her a higher rate of reinforcement, and then after about a minute, I will release her and we move on to a different exercise. Whenever I have a dog break position or just do something within an exercise that I don't want them doing, I make sure that I set up the next repetition for them to get it correctly. It's also telling to me that that first repetition of the exercise was too long for her by the fact that she was so hesitant to go back into it, which is another reason to keep it nice and short. And then I move into this little leash walking exercise where we are walking towards the store traffic. So we're walking towards an exciting area and I am stopping kind of right at the edge where we would be walking out into a new space, an open space where all of the people are, and waiting for her to give me eye contact and check back in with me. Now she decides to pick up her leash and offer a retrieve. That's something that I always reinforce, and then I go in and I play this game with her. Whenever a dog picks up a behavior that is useful and appropriate as kind of a displacement, I'm bored, I don't want to do this exercise anymore, I'm trying to make myself feel better, I always reinforce that. I want her to have this as a go-to way to communicate with me and communicate with her handlers in the future, that she needs a little play break and she needs to do something that she finds fun and exciting, like this leash retrieve game. And if you remember all the way back to, I think, the second week that she was with me, this is something that I taught really early on as a socialization exercise. And I mentioned how it's both a task and it's a helpful behavior for her to have, but it's also something that we can pull out when she's feeling uncomfortable or she's feeling bored or she's feeling frustrated. And she has started to pull it out whenever we are working on something and she does need a break. She's feeling bored or she's feeling frustrated, which is great. I love it when dogs kind of figure out that they can help themselves. So after that little play break, we go back in and we start working on that walking exercise. I just bring her back with me, and then what I want is for her to walk with me up to this space and then stop with me. And I want her to stop to my side and not swing out around in front of me. I very quickly then move into this middle behavior, and this is something I've actually never taught before, and you can see she's a little bit uncomfortable with it. And part of the reason I'm bringing it out here in this new space is because I want to see, can she think and solve complex puzzles in a space that's unfamiliar to her with a lot of distractions around. And this is a bit of a complex puzzle for her, and it is also her having to come into body pressure, which is something that she tends to be a little bit uncomfortable with. And I wanted to see, can you start to work through this a little bit in an environment that's new and unfamiliar to you? And you can see she's doing a really great job of that. Now, luring a behavior like this, where the dog does have some issues with social pressure, can be really sticky and it can easily backfire and become very coercive. So be careful with that. Guava is a generally confident dog that I'm not super worried about poisoning behaviors for her. And I just kept it really short, kept the rate of reinforcement high, and then, of course, end the session with her absolute favorite thing, which is getting loves. And at this point, we went ahead and we walked around the store. We worked on our leash walking a little bit. And she was much more easily able to do that because we had done some of that stationary work first.